Hi Guy, tonight we find ourselves on a deserted beach in Satsuma province, the waves whispering secrets against the black sand. It's eerily quiet, too quiet. You probably won't survive this, mainly because ancient Japanese punishments were intense. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with where you are in the world and what time it is. It's amazing how many people around the globe fall asleep to these stories. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the coarse sand between your toes, the salt-tinged wind on your face. The year is 1603, and Japan is in the Edo period, a time of samurai, shoguns, and strict social order. But this peace is a thin veil. You sense a presence. Historians still argue whether the peace of the Edo period was truly peaceful for everyone. Off in the distance, you see it. The magistrate's procession, stark against the desolate beauty of the beach. This is no picnic. This is a public flogging, a display of power meant to quell dissent. In ancient Japan, deserted beaches weren't just for beach bums. They were sometimes used for executions to avoid defiling sacred ground. Today's special guest is a court lady in training, accused of a crime you can't yet comprehend. The procession draws nearer. Torches flicker, casting long, dancing shadows that stretch and distort across the sand, making the approaching figures seem almost demonic. The rhythmic thud of a taiko drum reverberates through the night air, each beat a hammer blow against the silence. The air crackles with anticipation, with fear. You try to blend into the darkness, crouching behind a gnarled piece of driftwood, the rough bark digging into your back. You're an unseen observer, a ghost on the edge of a brutal spectacle. The magistrate, resplendent in his flowing robes, takes his place on a raised platform hastily constructed from bamboo and woven mats. He's a stern figure, his face etched with an almost theatrical severity. Two samurai guards flank him, their hands resting on the hilts of their katana, their eyes scanning the surrounding darkness, ensuring no one disrupts the proceedings. Before the magistrate, several other officials bustle about, preparing for the event. You shiver, though not from the cold. Fun fact, during the Edo period, Japanese commoners used dried fish scales as a primitive form of glitter. Imagine festivals shimmering with the iridescent scales of fish, catching the light of paper lanterns. Bit different from our modern glitter, but certainly resourceful. The condemned woman is dragged forward. Her silken kimono, once a vibrant symbol of her courtly status, is now torn and soiled. Her head hangs low, her dark hair obscuring her face. She stumbles, her bare feet sinking into the cold, wet sand. One of the officials roughly yanks her upright, forcing her to kneel before the magistrate. The drumbeat intensifies, a relentless pulse of dread. You strain to hear the charges against her, but the wind carries the words away, leaving you with only a fragmented understanding. Something about stolen documents, whispered conversations, a conspiracy brewing within the very heart of the court. The magistrate raises a hand, silencing the drum. He begins to speak, his voice a deep, resonant boom that carries across the beach. He speaks of loyalty, of duty, of the inviolable sanctity of the shogunate. His words are laced with venom, designed to paint the woman as a traitor, a threat to the very fabric of their society. You can almost feel the weight of societal expectation pressing down on you, the suffocating power of the Edo period's rigid hierarchy. Quirky fact: Edo-era samurai considered sneezing during a formal ceremony a sign of good luck, especially after a long speech. Imagine the magistrate mid-sentence, and for these egregious crimes you are sentenced, achoo, to be achoo. Well, consider yourself fortunate. A bit of unexpected levity in a very serious situation. The sentence is passed. 50 lashes. A brutal punishment. The crowd, a mix of local villagers and curious onlookers, gasps. 50 lashes is often a death sentence, a slow, agonizing death. You wonder if the magistrate knows this, if this public spectacle is less about justice and more about sending a message. A chill runs down your spine, colder than the ocean breeze. This is the Edo period's dark underbelly, the brutal reality that lurks beneath the romanticized image of samurai and shoguns. Scholarly debate. Some historians believe magistrates had significantly more lenient sentencing practices in coastal regions versus inland areas. The theory is that coastal communities reliant on trade and fishing needed a larger workforce, and thus harsher punishments like execution were less common. Whether this is true in Satsuma province, we may never know. The first lash falls. A sickening thud echoes across the beach. The woman cries out, a strangled gasp of pain. The whip, a wicked length of braided leather weighted with metal studs, rises and falls again and again. Each blow is a punctuation mark in this grim narrative, a testament to the magistrate's power, and a stark reminder of the precarious nature of life in 17th century Japan. You close your eyes, unable to bear witness to the brutality. The rhythmic thud of the whip, the woman's choked cries, the hushed murmurs of the crowd. These sounds paint a horrifying picture in your mind. The waves continue to whisper against the black sand, their secrets now intertwined with the cries of the condemned woman. The magistrate's shadow stretches long and dark across the beach, a symbol of the unseen forces that shape our destinies. And you, hidden in the darkness, are left to grapple with the unsettling truth of this night, a truth that will haunt your dreams long after the tide washes away the bloodstains from the sand. The sand dragged at my sandals with each heavy step, the grains clinging to the sweat beading on my skin. The air vibrated with a tense anticipation, a palpable hum that seemed to emanate from the hushed crowd. Faces, a mosaic of commoners and samurai, were etched with a grim fascination. Snippets of whispered conversations reached me, all revolving around the same subject, the court lady's alleged transgression. Theft. A silk kimono, they said, stolen from a woman of higher rank. In the rigid hierarchy of Edo period Japan, such an act wasn't merely a petty crime. It was a brazen challenge to the established order. Clothing, after all, was more than fabric and thread. It was a vibrant declaration of social standing, meticulously regulated and fiercely guarded. I saw her then, a small figure being propelled towards a hastily constructed platform. 2 guards gripped her arms, their faces impassive. Her head was bowed low, her dark hair a curtain shielding her expression. Yet, even from a distance, I caught a flicker in her eyes, a spark of defiance that surprised me, a refusal to be completely broken. The punishment, when it came, was less gruesome than I had braced myself for. No gleaming swords, no spilled blood. Instead, a thick bamboo rod was produced, its smooth surface belying the pain it was about to inflict. A low murmur rippled through the crowd as the official raised the rod. Historians, even now, debate the nuances of such punishments. Was this form of flogging, devoid of the immediate lethality of a sword, a twisted act of mercy, a way to preserve a semblance of dignity? Or was it merely another, more protracted way of asserting the unyielding authority of the ruling class? A chilling reminder of the consequences of stepping out of line. The first lash fell. The sound cracked through the stillness, a sharp, sickening thud. The woman's body flinched, but she remained silent. Another lash. And another. Each blow echoed in the sudden hush, each a stark reminder of the unforgiving nature of Edo period justice. The rigid social order, the intricate web of rules and regulations that governed every aspect of life, it was all embodied in the rhythmic rise and fall of the bamboo rod. Edo period Japan was a fascinating and complex society. The class system, a meticulously structured pyramid, dictated every facet of life, from the clothes you wore to the food you ate, to whom you could marry, and even how you spoke. At the pinnacle stood the samurai, the warrior class, revered for their code of honor and martial prowess. Below them, a complex tapestry of farmers, artisans, and merchants. And it's a curious fact, a little wrinkle in the fabric of this rigid system, that merchants, though often wealthier than many above them, found themselves near the bottom of the social ladder. Their pursuit of profit, seen as a somewhat unsavory characteristic, placed them below those who toiled the land or crafted goods with their own hands. This often resulted in a peculiar dynamic, where a wealthy merchant might find himself bowing low to a less affluent samurai. The crowd remained transfixed, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity and fear. I found myself wondering about the woman's story. What had driven her to such a desperate act? Was she truly guilty, or had she been wrongly accused? In a society so bound by tradition, by the weight of expectation and the fear of reprisal, the truth often became a casualty. As the punishment continued, I noticed a small group huddled near the edge of the crowd. They were dressed simply, their faces weathered and lined. One of them, an old woman with a brightly colored scarf wrapped around her head, clutched a small, oddly shaped charm. It looked like a miniature kimono, folded and tied with a piece of string. I remembered something I had read, a curious superstition prevalent among the common folk. Wearing a kimono inside out was believed to ward off evil spirits. A small act of defiance, perhaps, against the unseen forces that shaped their lives, just as the stolen kimono might have been a desperate act of rebellion against the very visible forces of societal control. The final lash fell. The woman slumped against the platform, her body bruised and bloodied. The official lowered the rod, the silence broken only by the woman's ragged breathing. The crowd began to disperse, their whispers resuming, now tinged with a mixture of satisfaction and unease. The spectacle was over. Justice, or what passed for it, had been served. But the questions lingered. The image of the woman's defiant eyes, the echo of the bamboo rod, the hushed whispers about the stolen kimono, they all painted a vivid picture of a society grappling with the complexities of order and transgression. And even today, centuries later, the debate continues. Did these public displays of punishment, these brutal spectacles of retribution, truly serve as deterrents? Did they reinforce the social order, or did they simply sow the seeds of resentment and rebellion? Scholars continue to pore over historical records, searching for answers in the fragments of the past. But the truth, like the whispers in the crowd that day, remains elusive, lost somewhere in the shifting sands of time. Her gaze caught mine across the swirling dust of the courtyard. Just a flicker, a spark of recognition that ignited a cold dread in my gut. It wasn't from the court that I knew her, not from the gilded cages of the shogun's palace. It was from somewhere darker, more secret. A whispered meeting in the dead of night, a gathering of women huddled around forbidden texts. Books filled with dangerous ideas, with whispers of freedom, of a world beyond the shogun's iron grasp. I shifted my weight, the sand beneath my sandals suddenly feeling like quicksand, threatening to swallow me whole. My breath hitched in my throat. The rhythmic thud of the flogger against flesh echoed in my ears, each blow a hammer against my own fragile composure. Did anyone else see it? That flicker in her eyes? Did anyone else suspect her true crime wasn't the petty theft she was accused of, but the far more dangerous crime of knowledge, of yearning for something more? She held her head high, her back a canvas of blossoming bruises. Unbowed. The flogging ended. 2 guards roughly hauled her to her feet and led her away, a broken bird dragged towards the gilded cage. The crowd, a sea of curious faces and hushed whispers, began to disperse, the tension in the air slowly easing with the setting sun. Yet, a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Something had shifted. The air crackled with unspoken words, with unseen currents. The casual cruelty of the punishment, the stoic silence of the condemned woman, the weight of our shared secret, it all hung heavy in the air, a storm cloud waiting to break. I remembered the glitter, the fish-scale shimmer on her kimono earlier that day. I'd thought it merely a fashionable adornment, a playful touch of extravagance. Now, a chilling realization washed over me. It wasn't just glitter. It was a symbol. The secret symbol of rebellion, a silent acknowledgement of shared ideals among a select few within the court. A dangerous game we were playing, masked beneath layers of silk and obedience. Many of us, the women of the court, held secrets far deeper than the carefully painted smiles we wore. Beneath the floorboards of our chambers, in hidden rooms behind sliding panels, we practiced the arts of war. The graceful movements of the fan dance could, with a subtle shift, become a deadly strike. The delicate pins that held our hairstyles in place could become weapons in skilled hands. We trained in secret, honing our bodies and minds, preparing for a future we could only dream of, a future where the whispers of freedom became a roar. The irony wasn't lost on me. We painted our faces with powdered nightingale droppings, striving for a porcelain complexion that symbolized purity and refinement. Nightingale poop facials, we jokingly called them amongst ourselves. The very substance that nourished the bird whose song celebrated freedom was used to mask the rebellious hearts beating beneath our elaborate kimonos. The absurdity of it all, the stark contrast between the superficial and the subversive, was a constant reminder of the precarious tightrope we walked. Our lives were a performance, a delicate dance between obedience and defiance. The shogun's court, a gilded cage where every word, every gesture, every glance was scrutinized. We learned to speak in coded language, to convey volumes with the tilt of a head, the flutter of a fan. We were shadows moving within the shadows, our true selves hidden beneath layers of ritual and tradition. The extent of our influence, our agency within the rigid hierarchy of the court, remains a matter of debate even among the scholars who study our time. Some see us as mere ornaments, pawns in the power plays of men. Others recognize the subtle ways in which we wielded our limited power, the whispers of dissent we sowed, the alliances we forged in secret. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the gray spaces between. We were the keepers of secrets, the weavers of whispers. We moved through the court like ghosts, our presence barely acknowledged, yet our influence rippled through the very fabric of the shogunate. We were the court ladies, and beneath the surface of our painted smiles and elaborate kimonos, a revolution simmered. The shifting sands of the court were about to be swept away by a storm of our own making, and I, caught in the gaze of that fallen woman, knew that I was no longer a mere observer. I was a participant. And the price of participation could be very high indeed. The magistrate's sandals scraped against the polished wood floor as he departed, the sound receding until only the rustling of the wind through the paper screens remained. His presence, so heavy and oppressive just moments before, faded like the tide, leaving a damp chill in its wake. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the frantic thump of my heart against my ribs. He had questioned me about the court lady, her reading habits, her acquaintances. He'd seemed particularly interested in her recent fascination with history. I had feigned ignorance, a tight smile plastered on my face, but the fear was a cold serpent coiling in my stomach. I crossed the room, my steps hesitant, and slid open the hidden panel in the wall. Inside, nestled amongst silk wrappings, lay my most prized possessions, the forbidden books, the same ones the court lady Hana had been reading. I touched the worn covers, the paper thin and brittle with age. Each word inscribed on these pages was a risk, a whispered rebellion against the rigid laws of the shogunate, a promise of knowledge and a world beyond the confines of our gilded cage. Could they have followed her, discovered her connection to me? The thought sent a fresh wave of fear washing over me. In Edo period Japan, owning forbidden books was a crime punishable by death. I knew this, we all knew this. Yet, the allure of these stories, these glimpses into worlds beyond our own, was too strong to resist. The books spoke of different philosophies, of lands where women held power, of histories that challenged the official narrative. They were a breath of fresh air in the stifling atmosphere of the court, where every word, every gesture, was carefully scrutinized. Hana had devoured them, her eyes shining with a newfound understanding, a hunger for knowledge that mirrored my own. I lifted one of the books, its cover depicting a fierce warrior woman wielding a katana. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here we were, confined within these walls, yearning for freedom, while this woman, inked onto the page, seemed to embody the very essence of it. It reminded me of something I'd read about samurai armor. Most people imagine gleaming metal, but some lower-ranking warriors, unable to afford the expensive metalwork, made their armor from hardened leather or even bamboo. A desperate act. A substitution born of necessity. Much like our clandestine reading, we couldn't access the approved texts, so we sought knowledge elsewhere, taking our own risks, crafting our own defenses. I ran my fingers over the faded characters. Had Hana been careless? Had she let slip a word, a glance, that betrayed her secret? The magistrate's questions echoed in my ears, his gaze sharp and probing. He was a skilled hunter, and we were the hunted. I carefully rewrapped the books, my hands trembling. I had to find a way to warn Hana, to ensure her safety. But how? Communication within the court was strictly monitored. Any message could be intercepted. Any misplaced word could lead to our downfall. My mind raced, searching for a solution. Perhaps I could slip a message into the hands of one of the kitchen staff, someone trusted who could deliver it discreetly. Or, maybe, the river. The river that flowed through the palace gardens carrying secrets on its current. I remembered a curious fact I'd stumbled across in one of the forbidden books. Apparently, wealthy individuals during the Edo era employed trained otters to retrieve lost items from rivers. Imagine that. A 17th century version of a Roomba, diving down to the riverbed to fetch dropped jewelry, or perhaps a cleverly concealed message. Of course, I didn't have a trained otter at my disposal, but the river itself could be a conduit. The risk was immense, but the potential reward, Hana's safety, was worth it. I decided to write a short message, warning her to be cautious, to lay low for a while. I would seal it in a waterproof pouch and entrust it to the river's current, hoping it would reach her before it was too late. As I prepared my message, I thought about the historians of the future, the ones who would pore over the fragmented records of this era, trying to piece together the lives of women like Hana and myself. Would they understand the risks we took, the price we paid for knowledge? Would they see us as rebels or merely as escapists, seeking solace in the pages of forbidden books? The scholarly debate on the true literacy rates among court ladies during this era continues to this day. Some argue that literacy was widespread, a secret language shared amongst women, a tool for dissent and subtle subversion. Others believe it was a rare skill, a form of entertainment, a way to escape the monotony of court life. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. For me, and for Hana, reading was more than just an escape. It was a lifeline, a window to a world beyond the walls of the palace, a spark that ignited a fire of curiosity, and a thirst for knowledge that could not be quenched. It was a risk we were willing to take, a price we were willing to pay, even if that price was our own lives. The suffocating air inside the house pressed against me, thick with unspoken words, and the lingering scent of incense burned for peace? Could such a fragile thing exist after today? I couldn't breathe. I had to get out. I needed the vast, indifferent calm of the ocean. Slipping out under the cloak of a moonless night, I returned to the deserted beach. The moon, now high in the sky, painted the sand silver, its ethereal glow attempting to erase the day's grim spectacle. But it couldn't erase the memory. The court lady's desperate gaze, the heavy weight of her whispered confession, clung to me like the damp sea air. The tide had come in, erasing the disturbing patterns etched into the sand earlier. But the tide couldn't wash away the patterns now etched into my mind. I was no longer simply carrying books. I was carrying her secret, a burden heavier than any scroll. I walked along the water's edge, the gentle waves whispering against the shore, a rhythmic lullaby that held a warning I could almost decipher. Each receding wave left a smooth, glistening canvas, and with each one, a fraction of my anxieties seemed to wash away, only to return with the next incoming surge. I stooped, picking up a piece of dark, glistening seaweed left behind by the tide. I'd seen villagers snacking on similar strands earlier in the day. It was strange to think something so readily available from the ocean could sustain life. Even stranger to think how precarious life could be, especially for someone like the court lady trapped in the gilded cage of the shogun's court. In Edo period Japan, ostracization was a fate more feared than death. I'd always known this, a cold academic fact gleaned from dusty scrolls. But now I felt it in my bones, a chilling premonition of the lady's potential fate if her secret were to unravel. The waves continued their relentless rhythm, each one a soft echo of the lady's whispered plea. I thought about the elaborate hairstyles of the court ladies, the intricate kimonos, the delicate fans fluttering like captured butterflies. Such a world of refined beauty, yet beneath its shimmering surface lurked a darkness, a constant pressure to conform, to obey. A single misstep could send one tumbling from grace, from privilege, into the abyss. I imagined the shogun samurai patrolling the castle grounds, their stern faces etched with duty. They were symbols of power, of unwavering loyalty. They wore simple straw sandals, kawaraji I recalled, practical for their constant movement. It was a strange juxtaposition, these powerful warriors in their elaborate armor yet with footwear so ordinary. I'd read somewhere that they went through several pairs a week. Imagine the expense, a small, almost absurd detail in the face of the larger, more terrifying reality of the court lady's predicament. The moon, my only companion in this desolate expanse, offered no answers. It simply illuminated the churning waves, mirroring the turmoil within me. What could I do? Could I risk my own safety, my family's security, to help her? The answer remained elusive, shrouded in the same mist that now drifted in from the sea, obscuring the horizon. Scholars debated the levels of personal privacy afforded to women of different social classes during the Edo period. I'd read conflicting accounts, some suggesting a degree of autonomy within the domestic sphere, others painting a picture of near-total control by male relatives. Where did the court lady fall on this spectrum? Was she truly powerless, a pawn in a game played by others? Or did she possess some agency, some hidden strength I hadn't yet glimpsed? The crunch of sand under my feet startled me. I hadn't realized how far I'd walked. I looked back towards the distant lights of the village, a small cluster of warmth and humanity in the vast, indifferent darkness. My own home, a haven of sorts, beckoned me back. Yet I hesitated. Could I truly return to that semblance of normalcy, knowing what I now knew? I picked up another piece of seaweed, its texture surprisingly smooth and leathery. I held it up to the moonlight, its dark silhouette, a stark contrast against the silver glow. Such a simple thing, yet it held the power of sustenance. It was a reminder that even in the harshest environments, life found a way to persist. Perhaps even in the suffocating confines of the court, there was a way for the lady to survive, to find her own sustenance, her own strength. The weight of her secret pressed down on me, but now, mingled with the fear, a flicker of determination ignited within me. I didn't have answers yet, but I knew I couldn't stand idly by. The waves whispered again, their rhythm no longer a warning, but a call to action. I turned towards the village, the lady's secret, a heavy but precious cargo I now carried, with a growing sense of purpose. The moon, now veiled by a thin layer of cloud, seemed to watch my retreat, a silent witness to the promise I'd made to myself, a promise to unravel the truth and, if possible, to help. The air in the court crackled, thick with tension. Whispers, hushed at first, snaked through the elaborate tapestries and gilded screens, growing louder, more frantic with each retelling. The shogun had issued a new decree: stricter censorship, harsher punishments, forbidden texts. The words hung in the air like a poisoned dart, their sharp points aimed directly at my heart. The walls felt as though they were closing in, the very air growing thin and suffocating. The sea, my constant companion, my solace, no longer whispered its secrets. It roared. I'd heard this kind of news before, whispers that solidified into pronouncements, pronouncements that became chains. It is never good when shoguns issue new decrees. Each one chips away at freedoms, at knowledge, at the very essence of what it means to be human. They say it's for the good of the realm, for stability, for order. But order built on fear is a brittle thing, easily shattered. Historians still argue, even now, whether this particular decree, this tightening of the noose, was a response to specific threats, rebellious factions perhaps, whispering sedition in the shadows, or simply another move in the ongoing game of control, the shogun flexing his power, reminding everyone who held the reins. I knew what this meant. I knew the risks. But some things are worth the risk. Some truths are too important to be silenced. In the dead of night, under the cloak of a starless sky, I slipped out of the palace. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. The sack I carried was heavy, not with gold or jewels, but with something far more precious: books, forbidden books. Books filled with ideas, with histories, with worlds beyond the confines of the shogun's rigid control. Each page was a whispered rebellion, each word a spark that could ignite a fire. The beach was deserted, the sand cold beneath my bare feet. The waves crashed against the shore, their rhythmic roar a stark contrast to the suffocating quiet of the court. I waded into the icy surf, the water swirling around my ankles, then my knees, then my waist. The weight of the sack pulled at me, threatening to drag me under. But I held on tight. These words, these stories, deserved to be preserved, even if it meant consigning them to the depths. With a heavy heart, I let the sack go. It sank beneath the crushing waves, swallowed by the darkness. A small, bitter part of me mourned their loss. But a larger part, a fiercer part, rejoiced. The shogun might control the land, but the sea kept its secrets. Lower-class Japanese people, resourceful and resilient, found ways to nourish themselves even in times of scarcity. They'd ferment soybeans with seaweed, creating a nutritious paste similar to miso. It was a simple food, but it sustained them, body and soul. A testament to human ingenuity, to the ability to find sustenance and hope even in the face of adversity. It's a small piece of history, a glimpse into the lives of those who toiled in the shadows of the grand palaces and elaborate ceremonies. They left no grand monuments, their names are lost to time. But their ingenuity, their quiet strength, echoes through the ages. The rigid social hierarchy of Japan, a carefully constructed web of rules and obligations, might lead one to believe that everyone was locked into their predetermined roles. Yet, even within this seemingly inflexible system, pockets of unexpected freedom could be found. The geishas, for instance, despite being entertainers, often wielded a surprising degree of influence. They moved within the highest circles of society, privy to secrets and whispers, their wit and intelligence valued as much as their beauty and artistry. They navigated the complex social landscape with a deftness that belied their perceived position, carving out spaces of independence and power in a world that sought to confine them. It is a testament to the human spirit, its enduring capacity to find agency and autonomy, even within the most restrictive of structures. The shogun's decree, the sudden tightening of censorship, remains a subject of debate among scholars even to this day. Was it a preemptive strike against a brewing rebellion, a desperate attempt to quell dissent before it could take root? Or was it simply a manifestation of the shogun's paranoia, a desire to exert absolute control, to silence any voice that dared to question his authority? The historical record is fragmented, the truth obscured by layers of political maneuvering and self-serving narratives. Some scholars point to intercepted messages, rumored plots, whispers of discontent as evidence of a genuine threat. Others argue that these were fabrications, manufactured justifications for a power grab. The debate continues, a testament to the complexities of history, the difficulty of discerning truth from propaganda, motive from action. The shogun's true motivations, like so many secrets of the past, may forever remain shrouded in mystery. The shelves stand bare, stripped clean like bones picked over by vultures. Yet, the phantom scent of forbidden knowledge lingers, a ghostly perfume of ink and paper clinging to the air. The aloeswood incense I burn, a fragrant spiral rising towards the rafters, is a futile attempt to mask it, a thin veil over a deep wound. Its sweetness mingles with the lingering ghost of books, creating a strange, melancholic fragrance that speaks of loss. I run my fingers along the polished wood, a phantom limb sensation, as if the weight of the volumes still pressed down upon them. Each empty shelf, a gaping void, a testament to what once was, a stark reminder of what is no more. Even now, the scent of particular volumes comes to mind. The sharp tang of aged paper from the treatises on military strategy, the subtle floral aroma clinging to the forbidden poetry anthologies, the earthy scent of the travelogues describing lands beyond our shores. In this Edo period, incense is more than a simple masking agent. It's a complex language of scent, a carefully curated art form. Specific fragrances for specific occasions, emotions, and even times of day. The aloeswood is for purification, for cleansing. But what can truly cleanse the stain of lost knowledge? I see her again in my mind's eye. The court lady, her defiant gaze burning into mine as the guards dragged her away. Her whispered words, "Knowledge is freedom," echo in the silent room, a stark contrast to the emptiness surrounding me. It was a dangerous freedom, one that came at a steep price. A price she paid, and one I now feel weighing on my own soul. The knowledge we shared, the forbidden texts we devoured in secret, fueled a dangerous fire in her heart. A fire that ultimately consumed her. My hands tremble as I reach for another stick of incense, my fingers stained with the residue of its predecessor. A wave of guilt washes over me, a heavy weight of responsibility settling in my chest. Had I not shown her those texts, had I not ignited that spark of rebellion within her, would she still be alive? The question, like a persistent splinter, digs deeper with every passing moment. I've seen things, know things that can never truly be spoken. Truths about the world, about the delicate balance of power, about the lies we tell ourselves to maintain the fragile peace. These truths, like the scent of forbidden knowledge, linger beneath the surface, tucked away in the hidden corners of my mind. They are a burden I carry, a secret I guard with a fierce, almost desperate protectiveness. Outside, the carefully manicured landscape of the garden stretches out before me. a miniature world of meticulously placed stones, flowing water, and precisely pruned trees. It's a beautiful illusion, a carefully constructed microcosm of nature, designed not merely for aesthetic pleasure, but for contemplation. Ironic, isn't it, that such a controlled, artificial environment is meant to inspire thoughts of the wild, untamed world beyond its walls? Just as we curate our gardens, we attempt to curate knowledge, to control its flow, to restrict its access. But nature, like knowledge, will always find a way. The memory of the court lady's words returns, a sharp pang of regret accompanying them. Freedom, a concept both alluring and dangerous. The freedom to learn, to question, to challenge the accepted truths. These are the freedoms that were stolen from her, and the freedoms that I now fear for myself. The empty shelves are a constant physical reminder of this loss, a symbol of the enforced ignorance that permeates our society. My gaze falls upon the small, lacquered box where I keep my writing implements. The smooth, cool surface beckons me, a silent invitation to record the thoughts and memories swirling within me. But the fear holds me back, a paralyzing grip that prevents me from putting ink to paper. The court lady's fate serves as a stark warning. The written word can be a weapon, a tool of rebellion, and in these times, such tools are dangerous indeed. I think of the samurai warriors, their fierce visages, their blackened teeth, a symbol of both hygiene and fearlessness. A strange paradox, that something so seemingly grotesque could be seen as a mark of strength. Perhaps it's a reflection of the times, a testament to the brutality of the world in which we live. A world where knowledge is a dangerous weapon, and silence is often the only shield. The scholarly debates, whispered in hushed tones within the hallowed halls of learning, center around which texts were deemed too dangerous, too subversive for the common eye, which authors were deemed a threat to the established order. The specifics remain elusive, shrouded in secrecy and political maneuvering. The enforcement, too, is a subject of much discussion. Was it uniformly applied throughout the province, or were there pockets of leniency, places where the thirst for knowledge could still be quenched without fear of reprisal? These are questions that haunt the scholars, the same questions that now haunt me. The emptiness of the shelves mocks me, a constant reminder of the void that has been created. The scent of the incense, while pleasant, cannot truly mask the deeper, more pervasive scent of loss, the loss of knowledge, the loss of freedom, the loss of a brave soul who dared to seek the truth. And as I sit here, surrounded by the ghosts of what once was, I know that the fight for knowledge, for freedom, is far from over. It is a fight that continues in the whispered words, in the hidden scrolls, in the defiant gaze of those who dare to question, to learn, to dream of a world where knowledge is not a crime, but a birthright. The court whispers. Not about the flogged court lady, her screams still echoing in the shadowed corridors of memory. No, these whispers are different, slithering like smoke through the paper walls, clinging to the silken robes of the nobles. They speak of disappearances, not just trinkets misplaced, or servants wandering off, but entire libraries vanishing, scrolls turning to dust, people gone without a trace as if swallowed by the very earth beneath the palace. A scholar renowned for his knowledge of ancient texts, poof. A lady-in-waiting known for her sharp wit and even sharper tongue, gone. The air, once thick with the perfume of cherry blossoms and the cloying sweetness of courtly intrigue, grows heavy again, a suffocating blanket pressing on your chest like a physical weight. In Edo, Japan, fear wasn't an abstract concept whispered in hushed tones behind closed doors. It was a constant shadow woven into the very fabric of society, a chilling presence that dictated every action, every word, every thought. You remember the fear, cold and sharp as the sea spray on your face, as you hid amongst the jagged rocks on the beach, the tide consuming your precious books, the only link to a world beyond the stifling confines of the court. You remember the crushing weight of the shogun's decrees, edicts that could reshape lives and snuff out futures with a single brushstroke. Now the weight is twice as crushing, an invisible force that bends your spine and steals the breath from your lungs. You remember the carpenter you saw once, working on a section of the palace wall. His hands, calloused and strong, moved with a precision that bordered on artistry. He used no nails, just intricate interlocking joints, a testament to a tradition passed down through generations. It was a marvel of engineering, of strength and flexibility. Yet even this seemingly immutable structure felt fragile now, as if the very foundations of the palace were threatened by the unseen force that was stealing people away. Even the boisterous laughter echoing from the city beyond the palace walls seems muted, swallowed by the growing unease. You hear snippets of conversation, rumors whispered in marketplaces and tea houses. Sumo wrestlers, their massive forms clashing in the ring, providing a brief, visceral distraction from the creeping dread. Sumo, already a popular sport, had become a national obsession during the Edo period. Tournaments drawing huge crowds eager for a spectacle, a release. But even the roar of the crowd couldn't drown out the whispers, the fear that seeped into every corner of Edo. The court, usually a hive of buzzing activity, a constant hum of gossip, secrets, and unspoken truths, is now quiet, so quiet it's unsettling. The elaborate kimonos and painted fans seem to hide trembling hands and fearful glances. The smiles are strained, the laughter forced. Even the geishas, masters of artifice and illusion, cannot mask the tension that hangs in the air. Historians, poring over fragmented records and whispered accounts, still argue about the nature of these disappearances. Were they orchestrated by the shogunate, a brutal but efficient method of silencing dissent and consolidating power? Or were they merely the result of an overzealous magistrate, a man drunk on his own authority, dispensing his own twisted form of justice? The truth, like the missing people, remains elusive, lost somewhere in the labyrinthine corridors of history. You recall overhearing a heated discussion between two scholars, their voices hushed but passionate, debating the role of court ladies in the political landscape of the Edo period. One argued that their influence was limited to the inner circles of the court. Their power derived solely from their proximity to those in power. The other countered, citing examples of ladies who had wielded considerable influence, subtly shaping policy and manipulating events from behind the scenes. The true extent of their political dissent, their willingness to challenge the established order, remains a matter of ongoing historical debate, another unanswered question whispered in the hallowed halls of academia. The silence in the court is broken only by the rustle of silk and the occasional cough, each sound amplified in the oppressive stillness. The fear is palpable, a living entity that coils around you, tightening its grip. You look around at the painted faces, the elaborate hairstyles, the opulent surroundings, and you wonder, who will be next? Which shadow will lengthen and then vanish, leaving only an echoing silence in its wake? The weight on your chest grows heavier, the whispers louder, and you realize that in the court of the shogun, even the walls have ears, and silence can be the deadliest weapon of all. You see him everywhere now, a samurai, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. He's always on the periphery, a shadow lurking in the corridors, a silent observer. You know he's watching you, he has been watching you. In Edo period Japan, samurai weren't just warriors. They also served as administrators, officials, and even secret police. You avoid his gaze, but you feel his presence like a cold draft, a constant reminder of the unspoken fear permeating the court. The air itself feels thick, heavy with whispers and sidelong glances. Every rustle of silk, every creak of the floorboards sends a shiver down your spine. Is it the wind, or is he closer now? The court lady in training's fate is now known to everyone. Banishment from court. A sentence of social death. Perhaps as severe as losing her head. She was young, barely a woman, and her transgression, whatever it may have been, is now shrouded in rumor and speculation. Some say she spoke ill of the shogun. Others whisper of a forbidden romance, a clandestine meeting beneath the cherry blossoms. The truth, like the samurai's face, remains hidden, lost in the shadows of the court. Her family, once proud and influential, is now disgraced. Their name, once spoken with respect, is now uttered in hushed tones, a cautionary tale whispered behind painted fans. Banishment from court. It's not just exile from the physical space. It's exile from society, from life as they knew it. Historians still argue whether her banishment was a mercy or a more subtle form of social execution. Was it a way to silence her, to erase her from history, or a way to spare her family the shame of a public execution? The questions hang in the air, unanswered, adding another layer to the pervasive unease. You clutch your oiled paper umbrella a little tighter. The rain is falling steadily now, a a soft, melancholic rhythm against the paper and bamboo frame. It's a beautiful object, intricately painted with scenes of cranes taking flight. Japanese umbrellas, you've learned, are a marvel of simple ingenuity. Stylish, biodegradable, it's a small comfort in this world of whispers and shadows. You wonder if the banished court lady carried a similar umbrella, if she sought shelter from the rain, from the judging eyes, just as you do now. The gardens, once a place of peace and contemplation, now feel oppressive. The vibrant colors of the flowers seem muted, dulled by the somber atmosphere. Even the koi in the pond seem to swim with a listless disquiet. You remember a story from your childhood, a tale of how people used to catch fireflies and place them in small cages to use as lanterns. The original mood lighting. It seems a strange and beautiful custom now, a stark contrast to the darkness that clings to the court. You can almost imagine the soft, ethereal glow of the fireflies, a beacon of hope in the oppressive night. But here, in the heart of the shogun's court, even the memory of that gentle light feels distant, unattainable. The censorship is tightening its grip. Every word, every gesture is scrutinized. You find yourself choosing your words carefully, avoiding any topic that might be deemed controversial. Even in private conversations, you've heard whispers of secret scrolls confiscated and burned, of poets silenced and playwrights imprisoned. The fear is palpable, a living thing that breathes down your neck. You can't shake the feeling that you are being watched, not just by the shadowy samurai, but by unseen eyes, ears hidden in the very walls themselves. The court lady's banishment serves as a chilling reminder of the consequences of stepping out of line, of speaking out of turn. But what exactly was her transgression? Was it a genuine threat to the shogunate, or simply a convenient excuse to make an example of someone, to instill fear in the hearts of the others? You remember overhearing a heated discussion between two scholars, arguing about the real enforcement severity of the censorship decrees and the level of involvement of higher authorities in these cases. One argued that the decrees were selectively enforced, used as a tool to suppress dissent and maintain power. The other countered that the censorship was a necessary measure to maintain order and stability in a turbulent time. Their words echo in your mind now, adding to the confusion and uncertainty. The samurai shifts slightly in the shadows, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Is he real, or a figment of your increasingly paranoid imagination? You can't be sure. But the fear is real as the rain falling on your oiled paper umbrella, as real as the silence that hangs heavy in the air. You draw your cloak tighter around you, seeking a semblance of comfort, a shield against the unseen eyes and the unspoken fear that permeates every corner of the shogun's court. You quicken your pace, eager to reach the relative safety of your quarters, hoping that tonight, at least, the shadows will stay at bay. But even as you hurry through the winding corridors, you know that the samurai's gaze, like the fear itself, will follow you. You can't avoid it any longer. The summons, tucked into your sleeve, feels like a burning ember. It's time for the meeting. You slip through the shadowed corridors of the palace, your footsteps muffled by the thick tatami mats. Finally, you reach the unassuming section of wall. One precise push reveals the hidden door, just as the court lady showed you. You slip inside, the mechanism clicking softly shut behind you. The air in the chamber is thick with the cloying scent of sandalwood incense, a stark contrast to the crisp night air you left behind. Whispered words, like the rustling of dry leaves, swirl around you. The flickering candlelight, the only source of illumination, casts long, dancing shadows that obscure the faces of those gathered but amplify the nervous energy in the room. The low ceiling, supported by dark, aged wooden beams, seems to press down on you, adding to the sense of claustrophobia. This hidden chamber, is not unique. In Edo period Japan, such secret spaces weren't always used for clandestine meetings like this. Some were built to safeguard valuables, family heirlooms, or even important documents. Others served as escape routes, hidden passages leading out of the palace or into the city's labyrinthine network of streets and alleys. The thought provides a sliver of comfort, a reminder that even in this tense atmosphere there is a way out. As you move further into the room, you catch snippets of conversations, hushed discussions of disappearances, whispered accounts of more books being confiscated and burned. Each word is like a stone added to the knot of dread tightening in your stomach. You think about the scholar you met weeks ago, the one with the burning passion for forbidden knowledge. Is he here, or has he too vanished? The flickering candlelight illuminates a small, worn table in the center of the room, covered with a dark cloth. Around it, figures huddle, their faces partially obscured by the shadows. You recognize some: a merchant known for his liberal views, a disgruntled samurai, and even, surprisingly, a low-ranking court official. The diversity of the group underscores the growing unease permeating through all levels of Edo society. You find a space near the back of the room, trying to remain inconspicuous. The reports of disappearances and book burnings are not new, but hearing them repeated here, in this clandestine setting, gives them a chilling weight. You wonder, as historians still do, whether these secret gatherings were a genuine threat to the shogunate, a breeding ground for rebellion, or merely a form of intellectual resistance, a desperate attempt to preserve knowledge and ideas in a time of increasing censorship. The debate continues to this day. Some historians argue that these meetings, while embodying a spirit of defiance, were too fragmented and disorganized to pose a real threat to the established power. Others contend that the very existence of such gatherings, the sharing of forbidden knowledge, and the fostering of dissenting opinions represented a dangerous undercurrent that the shogunate was right to fear. You shift uneasily, the hard earthen floor offering little comfort. Your mind wanders for a moment, seeking a distraction from the oppressive atmosphere. You think of something you read recently, a burgeoning art form gaining popularity among the common people. Origami, the intricate folding of paper into birds, flowers, and other shapes, a seemingly simple pastime, perhaps offered a quiet form of expression in these restrictive times. A small, folded paper crane, tucked into the sleeve of your kimono, suddenly feels like a tangible symbol of hope. Another thought, equally incongruous with the seriousness of the meeting, flickers through your mind. You remember reading about the public bathhouses of Edo, the Sento. Despite the limited technology of the era, these bathhouses were surprisingly sophisticated, offering a place for people from all walks of life to cleanse themselves, relax, and socialize. It seems almost impossible to reconcile the image of steamy bathhouses, filled with laughter and conversation, with the hushed anxiety of this secret chamber. Your attention snaps back to the meeting as a figure emerges from the shadows. An older man, his face lined with wisdom and worry, speaks in low, measured tones. He recounts the latest incidents of censorship, the increasing pressure from the authorities, and the growing danger faced by those who dare to seek knowledge beyond the prescribed limits. His words hang heavy in the air, each syllable a testament to the precariousness of their situation. The flickering candlelight throws his face into sharp relief, highlighting the deep shadows under his eyes and the lines etched around his mouth. He speaks of the importance of their gatherings, of the need to preserve knowledge and resist the encroaching darkness. His words are not those of a fiery revolutionary, but of a scholar, a keeper of knowledge, desperately trying to hold on to the flame of learning in a world that seems determined to extinguish it. Historians still debate the frequency and scale of these meetings, poring over fragmented records and conflicting accounts. Some believe they were rare occurrences, involving only a handful of individuals. Others argue that they were more widespread, representing a significant underground network of dissent. The truth, like the faces hidden in the shadows of this chamber, remains elusive. The meeting continues, the whispered words blending with the crackling of the candles. You listen intently, absorbing the information, the anxieties, and the shared sense of purpose. The knot of dread in your stomach hasn't disappeared, but it's mingled now with a different feeling, a flicker of hope, ignited by the shared defiance in this hidden chamber beneath the flickering candlelight. The flickering candlelight painted dancing shadows on the worn, silk-bound pages. Each rustle felt like a whispered transgression. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs as the reader's voice, low and hushed, wove a tale of a world beyond imagining. A world where women walked unveiled, their voices ringing with laughter and unbound opinions. A world overflowing with libraries, their shelves groaning under the weight of uncensored knowledge, where every question was met with an answer, not the sharp edge of a sword. A world without shoguns, without the rigid hierarchy that dictated every breath we took. My palms slicked with a cold sweat. My gaze drifted to the chamber's hidden entrance, half expecting the telltale shadow of a samurai to stretch across the threshold. Every creak of the old house, every whisper of the wind against the paper walls, sent a jolt of fear through me. In this era, the Edo period, words themselves could be weapons. Certain words, concepts, entire histories were deemed taboo, erased from official records, their utterance punishable by, well, We dared not even speak of the punishment. These unspoken words, these forbidden histories, pressed down on me, heavy as boulders. The weight reminded me of those heavy sacks, filled with forbidden books, sinking beneath the crushing waves. We'd watched from the cliffs, helpless, as the sea swallowed them whole, as if the ocean itself conspired to keep knowledge locked away in its deepest, darkest depths. The fear clenching my gut now felt just as heavy, just as suffocating. The reader paused, her voice catching in her throat. And so, the women of this land, they voted. She whispered, the words sounding foreign and dangerous on her tongue. A shiver ran down my spine. To choose, to have a say in one's own destiny, such a concept was almost unthinkable here, yet in this forbidden story it seemed as natural as the rising sun. I remembered old Master Ito, his face a mask of fury, as he'd railed against the black market booksellers. They peddle these dangerous ideas, he'd thundered, filling the minds of the weak with fantasies of rebellion. But some whispered that the shoguns themselves secretly funded these booksellers, using the forbidden texts as a way to identify dissenters, to root out those with rebellious hearts. Even now, historians argue whether these texts truly represented a subversive force, sparking the flames of discontent, or were merely a cynical ploy, a way for unscrupulous merchants to profit from the thrill of the forbidden. I glanced at the katana resting against the wall, its polished surface gleaming in the candlelight. Japanese swords, renowned for their strength and sharpness, forged with techniques passed down through generations, each blade a testament to the artistry and skill of its maker, yet also a chilling reminder of the shogun's power. One wrong word, one dangerous thought, and that gleaming steel could silence you forever. My fingers brushed against my teeth, feeling the slight grit from the charcoal I'd used earlier. A strange thought, in the midst of such fear, to think of something as mundane as cleaning one's teeth. Charcoal. Who would have thought something so common could be used in such a way? It felt almost subversive in its own small way, like a secret whispered between friends. A small act of defiance against the ever-present grime and decay, a little like these hidden readings, perhaps a small flicker of light against the encroaching darkness. The reader continued, her voice gaining strength as the story reached its climax. A tale of revolution, of people rising up to claim their freedom. I listened, my heart soaring with a dangerous hope, even as the cold sweat continued to trickle down my back. What was the true impact of these censored words, these hidden stories? Did they merely offer a temporary escape from the harsh realities of Edo period Japan? Or did they plant the seeds of change, slowly but surely eroding the foundations of the shogunate's power? The scholars still debate, their arguments echoing across the centuries. But in that small, candle-lit room, as the forbidden words filled the air, I felt a shift within myself, a spark of something new, something dangerous, something free. And despite the fear that gripped me, I knew I couldn't turn away. The seeds had been planted, and somewhere, deep down, they were beginning to grow. The flickering candlelight danced across the faces gathered in the dimly lit room. The air hung thick with the scent of incense and something subtly floral, perhaps jasmine. My fingers traced the rim of the chipped teacup, the warmth, a small comfort against the chill that seemed to settle deep in my bones. Then, across the low table laden with simple refreshments, our eyes met. Hers, like mine, were shadowed, but in their depths a spark ignited. It was a flicker of understanding, a silent acknowledgement of shared risk. In that single, charged moment, an unspoken promise passed between us. We were not alone. The memory of the court lady's defiant gaze during the flogging surged back, vivid and unsettling. Her chin held high, her eyes blazing with an unyielding spirit even as the lashes fell. This gaze across the flickering candles felt strangely familiar, echoing the same unwavering strength, the same quiet rebellion. Were we kindred spirits, bound by circumstance and a shared yearning for something more? Historians, of course, argue endlessly about the motivations of women like us, like her. Were we driven by lofty political ideals, dreaming of a world where the lines of power blurred and the voices of women rose above the whispers? Or was it simply a thirst for forbidden knowledge, a craving to explore the worlds hidden behind closed doors and hushed conversations? Perhaps it was a blend of both, a complex tapestry of desires woven together by the constraints of our time. The rhythmic clicking of the clock in the corner punctuated the silence. It was a peculiar sound, almost a sigh. I'd learned recently that time itself flowed differently in this era. The hours stretched and compressed with the seasons, longer in the summer when the sun bathed the land in its golden embrace, shorter in the winter when darkness claimed the day. Imagine time itself bending to the whims of nature. It seemed a fitting metaphor for the lives of women, constantly adapting, adjusting to the ever-shifting currents of societal expectations. My gaze drifted towards the small, neatly tended garden visible through the open shoji screen. Even in the dim light, I could make out the rows of carefully planted vegetables. Someone had mentioned that even something as commonplace as fertilizer held a peculiar twist in this time. Dried sardine heads, imagine, a pungent offering to the earth, ensuring the bounty of the next harvest. It was a strange juxtaposition, the delicate beauty of a blossoming flower nourished by something so unconventional. It reminded me, somehow, of the hidden strengths within women, often overlooked, yet potent and essential. We spoke in hushed tones, our words carefully chosen, veiled in layers of polite conversation. Beneath the surface, however, a current of shared understanding flowed. We talked of poetry, of the moon's reflection on the still waters of the pond, of the changing colors of the leaves. But in every carefully crafted phrase, in every shared glance, there was a deeper meaning, a coded language understood only by those who walked a similar path. The extent of these hidden networks, the connections that stretched between women of different social strata, remains a mystery. Scholars pore over fragmented diaries, decipher cryptic letters, searching for clues to the true extent of these clandestine connections. How did information flow between the court ladies, the wives of merchants, the daughters of farmers? How did these threads of communication weave a tapestry of shared experience, of mutual support, in a world that sought to silence their voices? The woman across from me smiled, a small, almost imperceptible curve of her lips. It was a smile that held both sadness and strength, a reflection of the precarious balance we all walked. We were bound by the invisible threads of shared experience, by the unspoken promise to protect, to support, to empower one another in a world that often felt hostile and unforgiving. I thought of the risks we took, the whispers and hidden meetings, the constant fear of discovery. Yet in the shared gaze, in the silent understanding that blossomed between us, there was a strength that transcended fear. We were not merely survivors, clinging to the margins of a world dominated by men. We were creators, builders of our own hidden worlds, where knowledge was a currency and connection a lifeline. The scent of jasmine grew stronger, filling the air with its intoxicating fragrance. It was a reminder of the beauty that could flourish even in the darkest of times, of the resilience of the human spirit, of the unspoken promises that bound us together. We were women of the Edo era, navigating a world of rigid rules and hidden possibilities. And in the shared gaze, in the flicker of understanding, we found the strength to forge our own paths, to write our own stories, and to leave our mark on a world that sought to erase us. The heavy oak door exploded inward, splintering along its aged seams. Dust and wood chips danced in the flickering candlelight, momentarily obscuring the figure that filled the doorway. Then, as the debris settled, the samurai's shadow stretched across the tatami mats, a dark omen against the warm glow. Panic, raw and electric, seized the small gathering. A scholar's hand knocked against a candlestick, sending it tumbling. Hot wax splattered across the floor as the flame extinguished, plunging a corner of the room into shadow. More candles followed, toppled in the frantic scramble, each one swallowed by the growing darkness. Loose pages, ripped from their bindings, swirled in the sudden gusts of air created by the samurai's entrance. Forbidden words, inked in elegant calligraphy, danced in the dim light like frantic moths. Their dangerous secrets momentarily revealed. My breath hitched in my throat. My mind flashed back to the cold, churning waves, the weight of the books in my arms pulling me down, down, down into the suffocating depths. The icy grip of the ocean mirrored the suffocating dread that now coiled in my stomach. This time, it wasn't the ocean's weight, but the samurai's presence that threatened to drown me. His very stance, the way his hand rested on the hilt of his katana, spoke of power and a terrifying finality. Even now, centuries later, historians still debate the samurai's motives. Was he a mere instrument, blindly following the shogunate's directives? Or was this a rogue act, fueled by personal ambition or a twisted sense of justice? The truth, shrouded in the mists of time, remains elusive. The samurai's face was partially obscured by the elaborate kabuto helmet he wore, its ornate design hinting at his rank. The flickering light glinted off the metal, making him appear even more menacing. It's worth noting here that Japanese theater of this period, particularly No and Kabuki, made extensive use of elaborate costumes and masks. These dramatic presentations often depicted historical events and legendary figures, providing a stylized glimpse into the cultural landscape of the time. The samurai before me, with his imposing figure and dramatic entrance, seemed like a character stepped straight off a No stage, a terrifying specter brought to life. One of the scholars, a frail man with ink-stained fingers, began to babble incoherently, clutching at a scroll as if it were a lifeline. Another scrambled backwards, knocking over a small table laden with brushes and inkstones. The clatter echoed in the sudden silence that followed the initial eruption of panic. It's ironic, perhaps, that this clandestine meeting, held in the shadows to discuss forbidden knowledge, should be interrupted so violently. After all, beneath the rigid surface of Edo-era society, with its strict social hierarchies and rigid codes of conduct, there existed a vibrant underground culture. Gambling dens thrived in the back alleys, hidden tea houses hosted secret performances, and illicit literature circulated amongst those who dared to defy the authorities. Despite the shogunate's attempts to control every aspect of life, the human desire for pleasure and escapism found its outlets. This quirky juxtaposition between the rigid public facade and the clandestine world of entertainment provides a fascinating glimpse into the complexities of human nature. The samurai finally spoke, his voice a low growl that resonated through the room. He demanded the forbidden texts, the very pages that now lay scattered across the floor, a testament to our failed attempt at secrecy. The scholars, trembling with fear, could only stare at him, their faces pale in the flickering candlelight. They knew the consequences of defiance. They knew what awaited them in the shogun's prisons. The relationship between the shogunate and the various classes of samurai is a topic of ongoing scholarly debate. Some historians argue that the samurai were essentially puppets, completely subservient to the will of the shogun. Others contend that different samurai clans held considerable power and influence, often maneuvering and vying for position within the shogunate structure. The samurai before us, with his air of authority, could have been a direct representative of the shogun, sent to quash any potential dissent. Or, perhaps, he belonged to a rival clan, seeking to gain an advantage by seizing these forbidden texts. The ambiguity of his position only added to the tension in the room. I watched, frozen in terror, as the samurai began to gather the scattered pages, his movements precise and methodical. Each page he picked up felt like another nail in our collective coffin. These weren't just words on paper. They were ideas, dangerous ideas that threatened to undermine the very foundations of the shogunate's power. They spoke of freedom, of equality, of a world where the rigid social hierarchies no longer held sway. And for that, they were deemed a threat. The samurai, his task complete, turned his gaze towards the remaining scholars. His eyes, dark and impenetrable, seemed to bore into their very souls. He sheathed the collected pages, the sound of metal against leather echoing in the tense silence. He then issued a curt command, a single word that sent shivers down our spines. It was a word that signified imprisonment, torture, and perhaps even death. As they were led away, their heads bowed in shame, I couldn't help but wonder about the fate of the forbidden words. Would they be destroyed, consigned to the flames, their dangerous ideas extinguished forever, or would they somehow survive, passed on in secret, a flickering flame of rebellion in the darkness? The answer, like so many things in history, remains shrouded in mystery. My lungs burned, each breath a ragged gasp. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light filtering through cracks in the rough-hewn stone. The passage was barely wide enough for my shoulders, forcing me to scrabble forward on hands and knees, the rough stone tearing at my kimono. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient and indefinable, the smell of forgotten secrets. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a wild drumbeat urging me onward. Where was I going? I had no idea. I only knew I had to get out, away from the gilded cage, away from the suffocating expectations, away from him. Blindly, I propelled myself forward, the darkness ahead as terrifying as the danger I was fleeing. Historians still pore over the blueprints of the old palace, debating the purpose of these hidden passages. Were they purposely constructed as escape routes for those trapped within the labyrinthine corridors of power? Or were they simply remnants of earlier construction, architectural ghosts, whispering of a different time, a different purpose? The truth, shrouded in the dust of centuries, remains elusive. The passage twisted and turned, a claustrophobic maze designed to disorient and confuse. But disorientation was a small price to pay for freedom. Even if I found an exit, the real challenge would begin then. Escape in Edo period. Japan wasn't simply a matter of putting physical distance between yourself and your pursuers. It was an art form, a delicate dance of anonymity. It meant shedding your identity, becoming one with the teeming masses that thronged the streets of Edo. It meant becoming invisible. I stumbled, my hand landing on something slick and yielding. I recoiled instantly, my stomach churning. Something squelched beneath my fingers. Panic flared, hot and sharp. Had I stumbled upon? No, it couldn't be. Cautiously, I reached out again, my fingers brushing against something soft and pliable. Relief washed over me as I realized it was just a discarded piece of cloth, probably remnants of someone else's desperate flight. It's strange to think that even in such a moment of terror, my mind could wander to the everyday realities of Edo life. I remembered the pungent aroma wafting from the street vendors' stalls, the sharp tang of fermented fish sauce adding depth and complexity to the simplest of dishes. That umami, that savory fifth taste, was a staple of Edo-era cuisine, a testament to their resourcefulness and ability to coax flavor from the most unexpected sources. The thought of food, however fleeting, reminded me of another peculiarity of that time, the surprising efficiency of their informal recycling system. Nothing went to waste. Broken pottery became filler for construction. Old kimonos were repurposed into rags or patching material. Even human waste found a second life as fertilizer for the fields. Despite the rigid social hierarchy, this practical, almost communal approach to resource management transcended class boundaries, which brings to mind another point of scholarly debate: the extent of interaction between the different social strata. While official records depict a society rigidly divided by class, some historians argue that the reality was far more nuanced. The bustling marketplaces, the crowded festivals, the shared public spaces, these were all points of intersection, where individuals from different walks of life brushed shoulders, exchanged goods and services, and perhaps even ideas. The passage abruptly widened, and a faint glimmer of light appeared ahead. Hope surged through me, pushing aside the exhaustion and fear. I scrambled towards the light, my hands scraping against the rough stone. As I drew closer, I could hear the sounds of the city, the distant clatter of wooden sandals on cobblestones, the shouts of street vendors hawking their wares, the low hum of conversation. The familiar cacophony was music to my ears. The opening was small, barely large enough to squeeze through. I hesitated for a moment, peering out into the alleyway beyond. It was deserted. Taking a deep breath, I pushed myself through the opening and tumbled out onto the cobblestones. I lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, the cool night air a welcome balm on my burning skin. Slowly, I pushed myself to my feet. The alleyway was narrow and shadowed, lined with overflowing bins and stacks of discarded materials, a testament to the city's relentless cycle of consumption and reuse. The smells were a pungent mix of decay, and something else, something fishy, likely the remnants of tonight's dinner, discarded, and awaiting its second life. I took another deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I was free. But the escape was only the beginning. Now came the real challenge, disappearing into the crowds, becoming one of the faceless masses, shedding my identity like a discarded kimono. I had to become invisible, and in the sprawling metropolis of Edo, with its teeming population and labyrinthine streets, that, ironically, might just be possible. The sudden explosion of noise and light was a physical blow. One moment, the cool night air against my face, the whisper of waves a lullaby. The next, a kaleidoscope of lanterns, each a miniature sun vying for dominance against the encroaching darkness. My eyes, accustomed to the muted palette of the palace, stung and watered. I stumbled, the smooth silk of my court robes a dangerous liability on the uneven cobblestones. The smells, too, assaulted me. Acrid smoke, pungent spices, the sweet, cloying scent of something frying in oil. It was a sensory overload. a chaotic symphony compared to the carefully orchestrated quiet of my former life. I was a butterfly released into a hurricane. Every instinct screamed for the familiar safety of the palace walls, the predictable rhythm of court life. There, every gesture, every word was governed by centuries of tradition. Here, the crowd surged around me like a river in flood, a torrent of merchants hawking wares, children darting between legs, and samurai with swords glinting at their hips. I felt exposed, vulnerable, a secret spilling out into the unforgiving light. Edo, the heart of the shogunate, a city pulsing with life, with ambition, with danger. I had only glimpsed it from afar, a shimmering mirage from my secluded world. Now, immersed within its vibrant chaos, I felt adrift, a fragile leaf tossed on a turbulent sea. I clutched the small pouch hidden beneath my robes, the weight of it a tangible reminder of my purpose, my desperate hope. A man with a raspy voice and a tray laden with steaming dumplings jostled me, his call echoing through the narrow street. "Hot, fresh dumplings, filled with the finest pork and ginger." He winked, a glint of gold in his teeth. "Good for the soul, little lady, and even better for the belly." I shrank back, my face burning. Little lady? I was a lady of the court, trained in the arts of calligraphy and poetry, not meant to be addressed so casually by a street vendor. The thought of calligraphy brought a momentary pang of longing. Back at the palace, I spent hours perfecting each stroke, each delicate curve of the brush, striving for the perfect balance of form and meaning. It was more than just writing. It was a meditation, a way of channeling emotions and expressing the subtleties of the world. Here, in this swirling vortex of humanity, such refined pursuits seemed a distant memory, a relic from another lifetime. I stumbled again, almost colliding with a woman carrying a basket overflowing with brightly colored flowers. Amongst the familiar blooms, I noticed delicate orange and yellow petals, chrysanthemums, but not like those in the palace gardens. These were smaller, more vibrant, and were those tiny insects crawling on them? I recoiled, my stomach churning. Then I remembered overhearing the kitchen maids gossiping about the unusual culinary practices of the common folk. Edible chrysanthemum petals, a garnish, they said, with supposed medicinal properties. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I needed to find my bearings, to escape the suffocating press of the crowd. Spotting a narrow alleyway, I slipped into its shadows, grateful for the momentary respite. Leaning against the cool stone wall, I closed my eyes, trying to regain my composure. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. I had to succeed. My escape, my mission, depended on it. How long had I been wandering these streets? The moon, a sliver in the inky sky, offered little guidance. I remembered the whispered stories of Edo's nightlife, the shadowy figures that moved under the cover of darkness. The scholars at court often debated the extent of women's participation in these nocturnal activities. Some argued that women were confined to their homes after dusk, their lives dictated by strict social codes. Others, citing anecdotal evidence from diaries and woodblock prints, suggested a more nuanced reality, a world of secret tea houses, clandestine meetings, and women who defied societal expectations. Now, surrounded by the hushed whispers and the occasional burst of laughter echoing from deeper within the alleyways, I wondered if I was witnessing firsthand this hidden world, this other side of Edo. A sudden movement startled me. A cat, sleek and black, emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing like embers. It regarded me with an unnerving intensity, as if assessing my worth. Then, with a flick of its tail, it disappeared back into the darkness, leaving me alone once more with my fears and my uncertain future. I straightened my robes, took a deep breath, and stepped back out into the blinding light of the lanterns. Edo, in all its chaotic glory, awaited. I had to find my way, had to navigate this labyrinth of streets and shadows. My life, and perhaps the fate of others, depended on it. The rough hemp of the kimono scratched against my skin, a stark contrast to the silken robes I'd worn only moments ago. It smelled faintly of wood smoke and river water, the scent of a life lived far from the gilded cages of the court. My discarded attire, a shimmering pool of sapphire and silver, lay crumpled beneath a willow tree, a testament to the life I was leaving behind. Shedding it felt like shedding my own skin, a painful but necessary molting. I remembered the hushed whispers, the scandalized faces when a young court lady-in-waiting was accused of stealing a higher-ranking lady's kimono. The irony wasn't lost on me. I, a lady of the court, was now a common thief. I pulled the stolen garment tighter around me, tucking my hair up beneath a simple cotton scarf. It was a clumsy disguise, I knew. My hands, soft and uncalloused, betrayed me. So did my gait, the unconscious grace of years spent gliding across polished floors. Yet, it was all I had. I had to become invisible, a ghost in the bustling marketplace. The court lady's fate, a swift and merciless dismissal, flashed before my eyes. They had stripped her of her position, her dignity, everything, for a kimono. And now, here I was, walking in her very footsteps. Historians, I mused, would likely debate the practicality of my actions. Was this disguise a fool's errand, a romantic notion born from popular tales? Or did it hold a kernel of truth? Could one truly disappear into the teeming masses of Edo? I was about to find out. The Edo period, an era of rigid social structures, where clothing wasn't merely adornment, but a walking billboard proclaiming your place in the world. My stolen kimono, a simple indigo-dyed affair, screamed, "Commoner!" It spoke of long days spent toiling in the fields or haggling in the marketplace. It spoke of a life I had never known, a life I now desperately needed to emulate. Each step I took felt like a transgression. I was a trespasser in this world, a chameleon trying to blend into a canvas it didn't belong to. The vibrant tapestry of Edo unfolded before me. Merchants hawking their wares, children chasing stray dogs, the rhythmic clack of geta sandals on the cobblestone streets. The air buzzed with a frenetic energy, a stark contrast to the hushed stillness of the court. I was a whisper in the roar, a fleeting shadow swallowed by the crowd. I glanced at a nearby stall displaying brightly colored woodblock prints. They depicted scenes of everyday life. Actors in dramatic poses, beautiful courtesans strolling through pleasure districts, bustling marketplaces just like this one. Ukiyo-e, they called them, pictures of the floating world. The original pop art, capturing the ephemeral beauty and energy of Edo. Ironic, wasn't it? Here I was, living a scene straight out of one of those prints, a fugitive disguised as a commoner, while the real world continued around me, oblivious to the drama unfolding beneath the surface. A small, elaborately crafted cage caught my eye. Inside, a tiny bird perched on a miniature swing, chirping merrily. I remembered a conversation overheard in the court, a lady-in-waiting giggling about a message she'd received via her pet finch. These tiny avian messengers, a sort of Edo-era Twitter, flitted across the city carrying love notes, gossip, and even secret missives. The thought brought a wry smile to my face. In a world where social mobility was a fiercely debated topic among scholars, where climbing the ranks was a near impossibility, these little birds represented a strange form of communication, bridging the gaps between different strata of society. The efficacy of such social mobility, or lack thereof, was a constant undercurrent in Edo society. Could someone like me, stripped of my title and privilege, truly integrate into this new world? Could I shed my past and embrace this borrowed identity? The question gnawed at me, a constant reminder of the precariousness of my situation. I continued to walk, my senses heightened, absorbing the sights, sounds, and smells of this unfamiliar world. Every interaction, every glance, felt fraught with danger. The fear of discovery was a cold knot in my stomach. I was walking a tightrope, balancing precariously between two worlds, one I had left behind, and one I was desperately trying to enter. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the bustling streets. Lanterns flickered to life, painting the city in a warm, golden glow. The marketplace, though still crowded, began to thin out as people returned to their homes. I, however, had no home to return to. The court was no longer my sanctuary, and this new world had not yet accepted me. I was adrift, a ghost in the twilight clinging to a stolen identity, hoping against hope that it would be enough to carry me through the night. The worn stone steps, slick with moss and the persistent drizzle of a late spring rain, wound their way up the hillside, swallowed by the encroaching emerald embrace of the forest. Each footfall was muffled by the damp earth and fallen leaves, a welcome silence in a world that had grown too loud with accusations. This was the whispered secret, the hidden temple on the outskirts of Edo, a place where the city's murmur faded into the rustling of bamboo and the gentle trickle of a nearby stream. It wasn't grand, like the gilded temples within the city walls, but rather a humble structure, its wooden beams darkened by time and weather. almost swallowed by the overgrowth. It felt ancient, a forgotten sanctuary to deities whose names had been scrubbed from official scrolls, their stories replaced by sanctioned narratives. Here, though, in the hushed stillness, their presence lingered, a faint echo of forgotten reverence. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of incense and damp wood. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light filtering through the cracks in the wooden shutters, illuminating fading murals depicting scenes of a world both familiar and strangely alien. The tatami mats, worn smooth by generations of kneeling worshippers, whispered beneath my feet. This wasn't just a temple. It was a sanctuary, a refuge, a place where whispered prayers could rise without fear of judgment, or worse, reprisal. Edo, in all its bustling glory, had a dark underbelly. Temples, particularly those on the periphery, often served as more than just places of worship. They were clandestine schools, makeshift hospitals, and, crucially, hiding places for those fleeing the long arm of the law. I lit a candle, its flickering flame casting dancing shadows on the weathered wooden altar. My hand trembled as I placed a small, worn pouch of rice alongside it, a meager offering but given with heartfelt sincerity. The court lady, her face, etched with fear and defiance, haunted my thoughts. Accused of treason, of harboring forbidden knowledge, she had vanished into the labyrinthine streets of Edo, hunted like a criminal. Her crime? Possessing scrolls that spoke of a time before the current shogunate, a time when power was distributed differently, when knowledge was not a weapon wielded by the elite. Closing my eyes, I whispered the prayer, the same words I had heard uttered in hushed tones at the clandestine gatherings, words that resonated with a longing for justice, for a world where the pursuit of knowledge wasn't a crime punishable by exile or death. May the forgotten gods, whose wisdom still whispers in the wind and the rustling leaves, protect her. May they guide her steps through the shadows and shield her from the eyes that hunt her. May they grant her strength and courage in these dark times. The prayer felt both ancient and urgently relevant, a thread connecting me to a hidden history, to a community of dissenters who dared to dream of a different world. These hidden temples, their true purpose remains a subject of debate even now, among scholars who pore over fragmented records and whispered accounts. Were they truly havens for political dissent, places where subversive ideas could ferment and spread, challenging the rigid control of the shogunate? Or were they simply places of solace, where individuals sought refuge from the pressures of Edo's rigid social hierarchy, seeking spiritual comfort in forgotten deities? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the intersection of these two interpretations. Perhaps, for many who sought shelter within their walls, they were both, a sanctuary for the soul and a breeding ground for whispered rebellion. The flickering candlelight caught the gleam of a small, intricately carved box tucked beneath the altar. Made of dark, polished wood, it was a beautiful example of Japanese lacquerware. The deep, lustrous finish was mesmerizing, a testament to the skill and artistry of the craftsman who had shaped it from the sap of the lacquer tree. Such objects, prized for their beauty and durability, were often found in temples, serving as containers for sacred relics or offerings. This one, however, seemed different, somehow secretive. A small, almost invisible latch held it closed. As I knelt there, the silence broken only by the crackling of the candle and the rhythmic drip of water from the eaves, I thought of the court lady. Where was she now? Was she safe? Had she found refuge in a similar hidden temple, whispering her own prayers for protection and for a world where knowledge was not a crime? A faint click drew my attention back to the lacquerware box. The latch had sprung open, revealing its contents, a handful of smooth, polished shells, each one unique in its shape and markings. They weren't just any shells, though. They were the kind used in games of chance, tossed and tumbled like dice, their patterns determining the fate of the players. It was a strange find in such a sacred space. A fleeting image flashed through my mind, clandestine gatherings, not just for prayer but for something more. A flicker of excitement, a whispered wager, the clatter of shells against wood, a brief respite from the ever-present fear. Edo-era Vegas, played out in the hushed corners of hidden temples, a small act of defiance in a world where even games of chance could be deemed subversive. The weight of the shells in my palm was a tangible reminder of the precarious balance between faith and dissent, between spiritual solace and political resistance. The whispered prayers, the hidden temple, the games played in the shadows. They were all threads in the complex tapestry of Edo-era Japan, a society grappling with the tension between tradition and change, between control and freedom. The intersection of religion and political dissent, a topic that still sparks heated debates amongst historians, was more than just an academic exercise. It was a lived reality for those who sought refuge in these hidden spaces, their whispers echoing across the centuries. The heavy wooden doors of the temple swung closed behind me, the sound a final punctuation mark on my old life. The scent of incense clung to my clothes, a ghostly reminder of the sanctuary I was leaving behind, but with every step down the worn stone path, it faded, replaced by the crisp air of the open road. I was no longer Lady Chio, bound by the stifling etiquette of the court. I hadn't yet decided on a name. Perhaps Akari, meaning light, a reflection of the knowledge I now carried. A wandering scholar. It felt strange, exhilarating, terrifying. My pack held little, a few changes of clothes, a brush and ink, the scrolls containing the forbidden knowledge I'd risked everything to protect, and a small pouch of coins. It was a meager start, but enough. Enough to begin my new life, my new purpose. I adjusted the straw hat I'd purchased in a nearby village, its wide brim hiding my face, a necessary precaution. The magistrate's men would still be searching, the shadow of their pursuit a constant companion. The memory of the rod, the sting across my back, was a fading echo, a dull ache that served as a reminder of the price of defiance. I walked for hours, the rhythm of my sandals on the dirt path a soothing mantra. The world stretched before me, an endless tapestry of rice paddies and distant mountains. The fear that had been a tight knot in my stomach began to loosen, replaced by a burgeoning sense of freedom. This life, this wandering existence was dangerous, uncertain, but it was mine. In the evenings, I sought shelter in small villages, trading stories for a bowl of rice and a place to sleep. I learned the rhythm of the road, the unspoken language of travelers. I saw children playing kamari, their laughter echoing through the air as they skillfully kept the feathered ball aloft. It was a simple game, yet it spoke of a joy, a lightness that I hadn't felt in years. I watched farmers tending their fields, their movements honed by years of practice, their faces etched with the wisdom of the earth. In the flickering lamplight of a village inn, I'd share stories from the scrolls, tales of forgotten empires, of scientific discoveries that challenged the rigid doctrines of the court. I saw the spark of curiosity in the eyes of my listeners, the hunger for knowledge that mirrored my own. I told them of lands beyond the horizon, of different ways of thinking, of the ever-changing nature of the world. Sometimes, over cups of warm sake, the fermented rice wine that warmed both body and spirit, the villagers would share their own stories. They spoke of local legends, of the spirits that dwelled in the forests and mountains, of the hardships and joys of their simple lives. The taste of the sake, slightly sweet and surprisingly potent, was a new experience, a small pleasure in this unfamiliar world. The shared stories, the warmth of the fire, the camaraderie of strangers, these small moments became my anchors in this sea of uncertainty. I knew the risks. Wandering scholars were tolerated, even welcomed in some places, but the knowledge I carried was dangerous, subversive. The court saw it as a threat to their authority, a challenge to the established order. I often wondered about the true impact of these wandering scholars. Did they truly plant the seeds of change, or were they merely a fleeting distraction, a ripple in the otherwise stagnant waters of Edo society? Historians still debate the question, their arguments echoing the uncertainties of my own path, the echoes of my past life, the silken robes, the hushed whispers of the court, the constant fear of displeasing the shogun, grew fainter with each passing day. They were replaced by the rough texture of my traveling clothes, the wind in my hair, the taste of dust on my tongue, the magistrate's rod, the samurai's shadow. These too began to fade, replaced by the warmth of the sun on my face, the beauty of the landscape, the quiet satisfaction of sharing my knowledge. I wasn't sure where the road would lead, what dangers lay ahead, but for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. I was a part of something larger than myself, a thread in the vast tapestry of human experience. I was a keeper of stories, a sower of seeds, a wanderer in search of truth. And in that search, I was finding myself. The sand, still black as charcoal, shifted beneath my worn sandals. Years had etched themselves onto my face, lines mirroring the ripples left by the retreating tide. Satsuma Province. This beach. How many lifetimes ago had I stood here, a young scholar choked by the rigid confines of tradition? The magistrate, his face contorted in righteous fury. The stoic shogun, the glint of steel on the samurai's katana. All ghosts now. Swept away, just like the court lady's cries, swallowed by the ceaseless roar of the ocean and the relentless tide of history. I stood where she had been flogged, the injustice, a phantom pain in my chest. I could almost see myself, a younger, more naive version, throwing my precious books into the waves, a desperate act of rebellion. The sea had claimed them, just as it had claimed the old order, yet here I was, drawn back to this place of endings and beginnings. The rising sun, a molten orb of fire, climbed above the horizon, painting the sky with hues of rose and gold, a promise of a new dawn. Hope, a fragile butterfly, stirred within me. The air, salty and sharp, filled my lungs, a breath of freedom I had not dared to imagine back then. The changes, were they inevitable? A confluence of factors colliding like celestial bodies, reshaping the landscape of Japan? The historians still argue, their voices echoing in the hallowed halls of academia. Deserted beaches like this one, they held a certain power in Edo period Japan. Places of exile, of solitude, where the rigid structures of society seemed to dissolve into the mist. Places where the whispers of the gods mingled with the cries of seabirds. Places of endings, yes, but also of beginnings. The ocean, a vast, unknowable entity, both destroyer and creator. My hand, gnarled with age, traced patterns in the sand, mimicking the calligraphy I had once meticulously practiced. I am a wandering scholar now, my identity forged in the fires of rebellion and tempered by the wisdom of years. The robes of conformity have been shed, replaced by simple garments that allow me to move freely, to blend with the shadows, to whisper stories of freedom into the ears of those who dare to listen. I plant seeds of change in fertile ground, nurturing the fragile sprouts of dissent. The shogunate is gone, its rigid hierarchy crumbling under the weight of its own contradictions. The whispers I began, here on this very beach, have grown into a roar, a chorus of voices demanding a new Japan. A Japan where knowledge is not confined to the elite, where individuality is not a crime, where the arts flourish beyond the gilded cages of the court. I pick up a shell, smooth and worn by the relentless caress of the waves. I hold it to my ear, listening not to the roar of the ocean, but to the echoes of the past whispering into the future. The court lady's cries, the magistrate's pronouncements, the crash of the waves against the shore, a symphony of sorrow and hope. I hear the laughter of street performers, their defiant joy a counterpoint to the rigid social order. Despite the strict rules, the Edo era was not without its cracks, its moments of levity, its vibrant undercurrent of rebellion. The acrobats tumbling in the marketplace, the puppeteers weaving their tales of love and loss, the storytellers captivating their audiences with fantastical narratives. They were all, in their own way, challenging the status quo. I see the vibrant colors of Japanese kites soaring against the azure sky, their intricate designs, a testament to the artistic spirit that thrived even under the watchful eye of the shogunate. These kites, dancing on the wind, were more than just toys. They were symbols of freedom, of aspiration, of the human desire to transcend earthly limitations. They were a reminder that even in the most restrictive of times, beauty and creativity could find a way to flourish. The scholarly debates continue. The academics poring over ancient texts, analyzing the cultural practices of the Edo era, seeking to understand how they reflect the complex social and political context of the time. Did the rigid social hierarchy stifle creativity, or did it, paradoxically, foster innovation within its defined boundaries? Did the emphasis on conformity ultimately lead to the seeds of its own destruction? These are the questions that still resonate, questions that I, as a wandering scholar, continue to explore. The sun climbs higher, its warmth chasing away the lingering chill of the past. I close my eyes, letting the sun bathe my face, feeling the grains of sand beneath my feet, grounding me in the present. The beach, once a place of despair, has become a sanctuary, a place of reflection, a testament to the enduring power of hope. The tide continues to ebb and flow, washing away the remnants of the old order, making way for the new. The future remains unwritten, but the echoes of the past continue to whisper, guiding us towards a brighter dawn. And I, the wandering scholar, will continue to listen, to learn, and to share the stories of freedom, planting seeds of change wherever the wind may carry me. The sun warmed my face, the salty breeze carrying a whisper of freedom. The beach, once a place of fear and punishment, now felt like a sanctuary. I closed my eyes, breathing in the salty air, the faint scent of seaweed and sand. The world beyond the shogun's grasp wasn't just a story in a forbidden book anymore. It was a whispered promise carried on the wind, a seed taking root in the hearts of those who dared to dream. The tide ebbed and flowed, erasing and revealing, a constant reminder of change's relentless rhythm. The world changed, but the ocean remained, a vast, silent witness to history's unfolding drama. The gentle rocking of the waves lulled me deeper into a state of tranquility. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of clandestine meetings, coded messages, and daring escapes. The weight of the rebellion, the constant fear of discovery, had pressed down on me like a physical burden. But here, on this deserted stretch of beach, the weight seemed to lift, carried away by the outgoing tide. My thoughts drifted back to the beginning, to the forbidden book that had sparked the flame of rebellion in my heart. Its pages, filled with tales of lands beyond the shogun's iron fist, had opened my eyes to a world I had never imagined. A world where knowledge wasn't a crime, where freedom wasn't a whispered dream but a birthright. I remembered the hushed gatherings in the shadows, the faces illuminated by flickering candlelight, the shared sense of purpose that bound us together. We were scholars, artisans, merchants, farmers, ordinary people from all walks of life, united by a single desire, to break free from the suffocating grip of tyranny. The path had been fraught with peril. We had lost comrades along the way, brave souls who had paid the ultimate price for their beliefs. Their sacrifices weighed heavily on my heart, a constant reminder of the stakes. But their memory also fueled our resolve, strengthening our commitment to the cause. We had learned to communicate in whispers, to read between the lines, to trust only those within our tight-knit circle. Every successful mission, every piece of smuggled information, felt like a small victory against the overwhelming odds. The shogun's spies were everywhere, their eyes and ears constantly searching for any sign of dissent. We lived in a world of shadows, where a single careless word could lead to imprisonment or death. Yet, we persevered, driven by the unwavering belief that a better future was possible. The turning point had come just a few days ago. After months of meticulous planning, we had finally managed to smuggle out a vital message to our allies beyond the shogunate's borders. The message contained evidence of the shogun's corruption and cruelty, proof that would rally support for our cause. The risk had been immense, but the potential reward even greater. If our allies responded as we hoped, the shogun's reign of terror would soon come to an end. Now, as I lay on the warm sand, listening to the rhythmic crashing of the waves, I allowed myself to feel a flicker of hope. The future was uncertain, the path ahead still fraught with danger. But, for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace, a quiet confidence that we were on the right side of history. The tide continued its ceaseless dance, erasing the footprints in the sand, washing away the debris of the past. The ocean, in its vastness and its constancy, offered a sense of perspective. It reminded me that even the most powerful empires eventually crumble, that even the darkest nights eventually give way to dawn. I thought of the stories I had read in the Forbidden Book, stories of courage and resilience, of ordinary people rising up to challenge the status quo. Those stories had ignited a spark within me, a spark that had grown into a flame of rebellion. And now I knew that our story, the story of our struggle for freedom, would one day be told as well. It would be a story of whispered hopes and daring deeds, of sacrifices made and victories won. It would be a story of how a small group of ordinary people, armed with nothing but their courage and their convictions, had dared to challenge the might of an empire. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. The air grew cooler, the breeze carrying a hint of the approaching night. I knew I couldn't stay here much longer. My duty called me back to the fight. But as I drifted off to sleep, the waves whispering against the shore, I carried a quiet hope, a sense of peace, a belief in the enduring power of stories to shape the world, one whispered word at a time. The ocean's rhythm lulled me, a steady beat against the silence of the coming night. And in that silence, I heard the echoes of the stories yet to be written, the stories of a future, free from the shogun's grasp, a future where the whispers of freedom would finally become a roar.